Hello and welcome to today's podcast brought to you by Grason-Stadler. Today's podcast is titled Teleaudiology with GSI Store and Forward. My name is Laura Prigge. I am one of the audiologists with Grason-Stadler. My official title at GSI is Application Specialist, but I am an audiologist and have been working in the field for about 20 years. I've been with Grason-Stadler for about 10 years, and so we're really excited to bring some of the really cool advances in teleaudiology to y'all today. And I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, my name is Tony Lombardo, and I am also an application specialist and audiologist with Grason-Stadler. I have been with Grason-Stadler for about 3 years, but I have had many different audiology jobs in our field over the course of just over 20 years of experience now. So let's start the podcast with a really broad question. And Laura, why don't you give us an idea of how we can define teleaudiology and give us a little bit of an idea of, what options are available for both practitioners and patients?
Absolutely. So teleaudiology really can be defined as audiologic services that are performed remotely. That is the most basic definition. There are really two types of teleaudiology that we're using today. We have synchronous, which is live or face-to-face, and we have asynchronous, which is store and forward. So synchronous is a live video interaction using a telecommunication device like Skype or Zoom. And it's really, I think, what we all think of when we think of tele anything is just some sort of video interaction. But with synchronous or live teleaudiology, the audiologist is in one location and the patient is in a different location with a trained facilitator or assistant to help with the appointment. This type of teleaudiology, the synchronous or live, really allows an audiologist to do a remote real-time appointment. So you can do an audiogram, you can do real-time fitting, you can do other kinds of testing, you can do hearing aid verification, you can do hearing aid adjustments. But the thing about this live or face-to-face appointment is you have to have an audiologist in one office. You have to have a solid high-speed internet connection to support video, and then you need to have a trained technician who's comfortable with the equipment and working with the patients and working with the audiologist to be the audiologist's hands and to really help move that appointment forward. The other type of audiology the other type of teleaudiology that we use is asynchronous. Now, this is what we refer to as store and forward technology. And what that means is we're going to capture data remotely. So from one location, we're going to capture some data, we're going to store the results, and then we're going to forward them to an audiologist for interpretation. This type of teleaudiology does not require an audiologist to be present for the actual evaluation. And because there's no audiologist, it is a little bit more limited in the types of tests that we can perform. But the patient will interact with a trained technician to obtain this information. The results are stored, and then again, they're forwarded to an audiologist, and that audiologist from a different location at a different time will interpret and make recommendations for the next steps for that patient. So Tony, can you please describe for us, what kind of teleaudiology does Grason-Stadler offer?
Sure. So Grason-Stadler has two different versions of store and forward. One of them is GSI Mtest Pro, and the other is Mtest Flex. So to begin with Mtest Pro, what it is a software system that is integrated with one of our audiometers. A lot of you might be familiar with the AudioStar Pro, our flagship audiometer. It works with that, and it also works with our mid-level audiometer, the Pello. And with this system, you're capable of capturing air conduction thresholds that are masked and bone conduction thresholds that are also masked, as well as forced choice SRT and WRS testing. So you can get some speech testing as well. So the way that the system works is you hook the computer up with two different connections to the audiometer. We use then the DD450s, which are commonly used for full frequency testing. And we also use a forehead bone placement. So we have a band that is properly suited to fit most people's heads, and it has the proper pressure for a valid bone score if it's collected on the forehead. So the patient is set up for the evaluation and then interacts with the computer to get any of those tests that I talked about before, air, bone, and speech. With AMTAS Flex, it is our tablet-based solution, and what this is a limited version of AMTAS. So you have the ability to capture only masked air conduction thresholds, but it also has the capability for a really simple 4-frequency screening. Again, this uses the DD450 calibrated headphones, and we choose those not only for comfort, but also because they do have a little bit of a reduction for ambient sound.
Those are some really great options for patient interaction and patient testing. So what barriers are Store and Forward designed to overcome for the patient and the provider?
Sure. So for the patient, there's a lot of different potentially different ways that it can be helpful. So first of all, it's a way to shorten distance. You know, one of the things about AMTAS was it was developed by Dr. Margolis with a grant from the Veterans Administration, and it was specifically made to service people and help them see more people. So they had a backlog. But the other problem that they had was they've got all these central locations, and now you have the ability to put AMTAS out in their more remote locations. So the veteran or the patient in this case doesn't have to travel as far to get quality hearing healthcare. So that's one potential benefit. The other would be a potential decrease in waiting time at an appointment. You can imagine being at a busy ENT office and having a doctor or several doctors potentially that are ordering tests, one audiologist. The patient, if they're in that queue, might be waiting a while, but if you have AMTAS, you can triage a little bit and put somebody on AMTAS while you're doing other things, so that patient might not have to wait as long of a time for the test. And for the provider, it's really a way of increasing our efficiency as audiologists. There are so many other tasks that can be attended to while we're utilizing AMTAS. So from our perspective, it's great because, you know, I mean, I've been an audiologist for 20 years. I've done a lot of pure tone hearing testing, and, you know, depending on where you're working, audiologists can spend up to 40% of their time just on really simple pure tone testing. So being able to automate that frees up for things like doing more notes, for seeing other patients, for doing other tests that require our audiology skill set. And since this is a test that doesn't need direct supervision from the audiologist, especially if you have good, properly trained staff, it's really a way to, you know, hands off, get a lot of information that can move your practice forward and just be more efficient. So that kind of what it kind of leads into is oftentimes a discussion of, you know, all right, so we can see how we can utilize this test a little bit and a little bit of the justification for it. But a lot of the questions that we get are, you know, how does it work and is it reliable? So Laura, maybe you want to take some time and answer that for us, give us a little bit of an idea.
AMTAS really does increase the efficiency, and it really is a big question that we get. You know, can I truly trust an automated evaluation? Is the patient going to suffer if I don't do the test by myself? And the answer is yes, this is going to help you immensely. The research and the validation studies that have been performed on AMTAS go back over 10 years, and they've been published in multiple publications, in multiple peer-reviewed literature. And, you know, there have been additional validation studies at a lot of different sites using patients, not college kids who have perfect hearing, but using patients who are in our typical demographic of testing, whether that is from the VA or some ENT clinics, people with normal hearing and people with hearing loss. The AMTAS really does utilize, I did say earlier, it utilizes a patented quality and reliability algorithm to ensure that we have that testing. And so when an audiologist gets a report from an AMTAS evaluation, not only do we get these thresholds, we also get a number of different indicators that help us interpret appropriately and really give us information for the next step.
So that's fantastic. But what about from the patient's perspective? Like, what is it like to take the test?
So I think this is a really, really important question to ask, because when we think about teleaudiology, the live teleaudiology, it's easy. They're looking at an audiologist on TV and they're interacting with that audiologist. And with AMTAS and with Store and Forward, it's a different, very different patient experience. So from the patient's perspective, AMTAS is a very interactive test. The test is self-paced, so the patient really has an opportunity to go as quickly or as slowly as they need. They do have a technician who's available, and they help with transducer placement. And then there's lots of easy to follow instructions, and the user interface is it's very intuitive. So basically this software just guides the patient seamlessly from entering their demographic information to starting the software and then completing the evaluation. It's nice because not only is it that comfortable, intuitive interaction with the computer, but it's also a way that the patient feels confident that they've received this hearing assessment when truly it might not have been possible if they didn't have this option. So the way that it works is the technician puts the headphones and the bone oscillator onto the patient. Maybe they give an instruction, maybe they don't. It just depends on, on the technician and the patient relationship there. But when you start the evaluation, the software will say, listen for a tone. There's going to be a tone, there's going to be masking, and then the patient says, did you hear the tone, yes or no? And so it's one of those situations where the patient makes a choice and then it moves on. There are a lot of different catch trials and other variables that help the audiologist with interpretation, but we were able to gather that data very quickly. When we move into speech testing, it's sort of like a separate test. You have a new set of instructions that say, hey, listen for a word, and then there are 4 words that are displayed on the screen. When you do SRT, it's super easy. It's just like a threshold. You hear a word nice and loud, you choose the word you heard, and then it gets softer and softer until you can't hear it anymore. And then after the SRT, the speech reception threshold, we move on to the word recognition, which is presented at a little bit quieter of a level than we're used to, that we would, it's quieter than we would present manually if we were, if an audiologist were doing the test, because it is a forced choice. But again, the task is very easy to understand. So then I keep talking about, what happens when the patient's done, what happens with the results, how does the audiologist get them, and what do they do? So Tony, maybe we could talk a little bit about like the quality indicators and how a professional or an audiologist would use those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably one of the most important pieces of the AMTAS software. And from the time that you begin AMTAS, we're collecting data on the patient. And this section of the discussion kind of reminds me as an audiologist of the things that we are taught about reading how the patient is taking the test. I mean, we're all doing this. We're all making judgments based on how they are taking the evaluation as to the reliability of the test. And so what Dr. Margolis did is he found a way to put some measurements on these things. So I'll give you a couple examples. So one of them would be like time per trial. So this is just measuring the average time from the time that the stimulus was presented until the patient responds. So he studied that, and he put plenty of people through this, and you found an average. You got your classic bell curve, and if people are taking too long, that can definitely affect the reliability, and if that becomes an issue, you'll see this light up as red on the report. The next one I want to talk about is false alarm rate, and this is the number of times that the patient is responding when no stimulus is presented. So like Laura was saying, false alarm rate is one where if there's a probability of about, I think it's something like 20% with each presentation that the software is going to say, okay, listen for a tone, and then not present a tone. What the patient might hear is nothing, or they may hear just the masking sound that we use that AMTAS uses during the evaluation. So if they respond to that, then the software brings them back to task. And I think of this as like, when we're doing our pure tone testing, it's often the case that patients will get into a pattern. So they start expecting to press the button at a certain pace. So when AMTAS, when they do this with AMTAS, it brings them back to task in the same way that we would do. We would either, chime in and say, hey, only when you hear the tone, or we might turn it up so they can get another, an idea of what they're listening for again, because we all know it gets challenging with very soft presentations. Another one of the quality indicators is going to be the average test-retest difference, which is the difference between 1K that is retested in the right and left ears. So just like we all remember from Audiology 101, the first thing we do is test 1,000 cycles per second, run through the rest of the frequencies, and then we test 1,000 again. And we can use that as an indication of the quality if there's a difference there. The one that I like the most is the quality check fail rate, which is AMTAS uses a modified Houston-Westlake type of bracketing that we use, or that we're taught, which is, down 10, up 5. And it uses, it establishes the frequency, or rather the threshold. So once that threshold has been established, it's going to make another presentation that is 5 dB above that threshold. And the patient should hear this. So if they don't respond to that presentation, then again, that is another red flag. And then, of course, with Mtest Pro, you'll have masker alerts for over and under masking, which the Mtest Flex you won't see those because it's not we're not doing any bone conduction. And then you have the final two that I'll talk about, which are the predicted average absolute difference. And this is going to be when Margolis did all of these studies, and there are links to it on our website, and we'll talk about that later as well. If you want to check out some of these studies, they're actually really interesting reads. This one, he's basically able to take a look at all of the different quality indicators, look at how the patient took the test, and based on how they took AMTAS, he can make a prediction of an estimation about what the dB difference would be pure by frequency, on average, what the difference would be between the automated test and if it was done by a human being. So if that's a big difference, then that might be an indication to do some manual testing with this patient. And then the last one, which is just predicted accuracy. And this is taking a look at all of the different factors that have been tracked during the test, and it's going to give you an overall quality, which is going to be either good, fair, or poor. And that is definitely words that we're used to seeing when we're grading somebody's reliability on the test. So that is, a short bit about how AMTAS has been validated and some of the things that have gone into the engine of the software system. But let's talk now, let's switch gears a little bit. And Laura, why don't you tell us some of the different ways that AMTAS Pro is being used in the various types of audiology practices out there?
For sure. It's fun when we talk about AMTAS and then we see it in real life practice. And like you mentioned earlier, Tony, AMTAS really was developed sort of with the VA in mind, because they really were searching for a solution that would be ideal and convenient for all the veterans. So like you mentioned, they have implemented this teleaudiology at CBOX or the satellite clinics so that you can see that patient who needs their hearing services but can't get on the schedule for a long time, or maybe don't want to or are unable to drive to the main medical center. Additionally, just another application of AMTAS in the VA, they have set up AMTAS workstations to help handle their walk-in patients during the walk-in clinics. And that's in the audiology departments of the main VA medical centers. And even though it was sort of developed for the VA, it's been really exciting to see how AMTAS has sort of extended well beyond the VA into the private sector. There are, other healthcare providers, other hearing healthcare providers who really noticed how the VA was utilizing AMTAS and utilizing teleaudiology and started to implement it in their own practices. So, for example, ENTs, they are busy and they're really starting to use this teleaudiology, this store and forward, to maximize the time of their audiologist, even in the clinic. So if there are 3 or 4 ENTs that are running a clinic and the audiologist is, swamped, there are 3 or 4 audios that are waiting. I remember when I was working in an ENT, I would panic because I knew somebody was going to wait for 30 or 40 minutes while I had to tend to these other patients. But when they start implementing AMTAS and they have a store and forward solution, these audiologists can really start managing more than one patient at a time. So the audiologist is able to do tympanometry. They're able to do OAEs. They're able to do counseling and selling hearing aids while this other patient is gathering their basic audiometric data independently with AMTAS. Also, there's a shortage of audiologists in the United States and America and globally. So there are ENT clinics that cannot find an audiologist that will work there. So when there's a patient that requires an audiogram or some hearing testing, the appointment for this patient is either cut short, and then the patient has to schedule and see an independent audiologist and then reschedule back with the ENT, or they can have a hearing test that's performed by a nurse or a medical assistant. And neither of those things are good options for the patient appointment. So ENT offices without an audiologist are starting to utilize AMTAS for those patients who need to have basic audiometric information to complete their appointment, and then they're able to refer to an audiologist for the follow-up and for the hearing aids and for the additional testing. But it really helps that patient flow and the patient satisfaction when an audiologist is not available. And it's also pretty exciting to see that private practice audiologists are starting to use AMTAS for their walk-in appointments and for their annual evaluations as well. Tony, do you have examples of the way AMTAS Flex technology has been used?
Oh, absolutely. So AMTAS Flex, I think that there is a ton of different areas and ways that this could be employed through audiology private practices in particular. Like I was saying earlier in my introduction, I've spent probably about 10 years in a dispensing audiology practice, and I would have loved to have an AMTAS Flex, simply because the vast majority of the time I was working in a clinic where I had an office manager who was fantastic, and she would have been more than capable, if I was busy, say, for example, and we had a walk-in, to get them started on paperwork and get an AMTAS Flex in their hands and maybe put them off a little bit until I had time to meet with them personally. I could think of it, a variety of situations like that. Maybe if you're doing an open house and you want to screen out some people that maybe have showed up that have normal, have them do the first step as AMTAS, and then you can filter down the people that actually need our help, and not have to spend time talking to people with normal hearing when that's not going to be as beneficial of your time. So there's applications like that. Things like annual hearing checks. If you've got your regular patient database coming in on an annual basis for evaluations, you can just grab their hearing aids from them if they're a hearing aid patient and give them AMTAS Flex. Within 10 minutes, they'll have updated thresholds, air conduction thresholds. You can evaluate that for change, but in the meantime, you can go clean and check their hearing aids, get them hooked up to the computer, and with the compatibility that AMTAS Flex has with GSI Suite, you can get that data into NOAA as well, and that's for both systems. So you can manage that data really, really easily as well. But there are tons of other options and tons of other places where this might fit. Everything from kiosks to occupational health, so doing workers on site, shipping to patients for in-home self-evaluation, especially in times of like we're going through today with this pandemic. There's a wide variety of uses that something like this could be used for.
So Tony, what do you think we can expect in terms of updates this year to our AMTAS?
Sure. Yeah, so AMTAS is going to have, we have an update scheduled, and there are a couple of things that are going to be coming out that will improve the software. First of all, noise monitoring. When I mentioned earlier, the DD450s do a really good job of reducing background noise, but being able to monitor it and being able to document it to make sure that your results are as accurate as possible when you're not using a booth setup is going to be important. So we're adding that functionality to both Flex and Pro. Right now with AMTAS, you are all of the octaves are required for testing. So everything from 500 to 8,000, all of those octaves are going to be required. We're going to give a little bit more flexibility on being able to select certain frequencies and turn some frequencies on and off. So that might match some of the protocols that people want to use with this automated software system. We are also going to be, and I think this is the biggest update, adding cloud capabilities to it. So being able to, say, have AMTAS Flex out I think of when I was in private practice, I had a relationship with an assisted living home that was close to my office, and I would go in every month and clean and check hearing aids. I could easily see coordinating with the activities director and saying, hey, if you have people that are interested in taking a hearing test, you can do, set it up in a room for a week and with instructions. If people could come in and test their own hearing, and then it immediately is uploaded to the cloud, and I have access to that patient's demographic and threshold information, and that might be pretty valuable information in today's market. So adding that capability is coming, and then we're also doing a little bit too short in the testing time. Right now the average is about 12 to 15 minutes if you're doing a full evaluation. That includes with Mtest Pro, air, bone, and speech. So we're doing a few things just to shorten the testing time up and get rid of a little bit of redundant testing where it's not necessary. So I think those are the things that are the most exciting for the updates that are coming for Amtest this coming year. Speaking of which, Laura, maybe you can share with us a place where people can find more information about the teleaudiology technology that GSI has to offer.
Absolutely. There are so many good resources right now. Teleaudiology is a super hot topic, and I think that this is a pretty unique and exciting approach to add to the teleaudiology piece of the pie. So, of course, we do have 3 webinars on Audiology Online. We have one on just intro to AMTAS. There's one, AMTAS Flex versus AMTAS Pro. And then there's another one on how to implement AMTAS into teleaudiology, how to really increase hearing healthcare, increase access to hearing healthcare. We also have a lot of information on our website, so www.Grason-Stadler.com, into the education area. And there are links to research and validation studies, white papers, peer-reviewed literature, and just some other interesting facts about AMTAS on the website. And then, of course, if you have more questions and want to talk about logistics, contact your local distributor. They will know, number one, how it works and how it might really benefit your practice. If you're thinking about it and you just can't get over over some of the barriers, certainly talk to them. They've done these installations, they've seen the successes, and they're excited to talk to you about teleaudiology as well.
Great. So I guess that kind of wraps it up to this very last question, which is, we talked about a couple of different versions of teleaudiology, the synchronous and asynchronous. So how would a practitioner know what type of teleaudiology is going to be right for them?
I think that, Tony, is the question of the day. Is it right, and which type do you choose? And I think that the answer is both. When you are considering teleaudiology for your practice, when you're implementing that, I really believe that a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous teleaudiology is going to be the key to your success, because we do want to maximize the audiologist's time, and we also want to maximize the convenience and the innovation of teleaudiology itself. So if you do have 2 methods where you gather the basic information with store and forward, and then you do the other parts of the appointment with the counseling and the recommendations and the hearing aid fittings with the live or synchronous teleaudiology, that is sort of a match made in heaven. And so when you compare and you combine these 2 types of teleaudiology together, that is the most ideal situation for a practice.
Yeah, I don't think I could sum it up much better than that. So with that, I think that we will wrap it up, and we very much appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast. Stay tuned for more from Grason-Stadler and more great content from Audiology Online. Anything to add, Laura?
Nope. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Take care. Bye-bye now.